than the one that we did in class. All right, so if you want to come in and do FRQ, you can do it at any time. It'll probably take you a half hour to 40 minutes to do the FRQ reassessment. Okay? Got it? Any questions about that? All right. Yes, sir.
Okay, so do you have a relearning plan for reassess the FRQ?
The relearning plan is the reading that you're going to do when you are reassessing.
Okay.
Yeah. Got it?
Got it.
Makes sense? Okay. Any other questions about the FRQ reassessment? Or the multiple choice reassessment? Or anything else? Okay. Homework is 5.7 to 5.9 notes. The Unit 5 Practice Quiz 3 due on February 24th/25th, next Thursday/Friday. I probably won't be here to yell at you when you don't do your homework, but I will yell at you when I get back. All right? I promise you that. I will yell at you when I come back. And then there'll be another assignment next week. Like I said earlier this week, my guess is the baby will be born next week. So either I'll be gone the whole week or I'll leave middle of the week. I'm not sure yet. I should be here Friday. We'll see what happens next week. Okay? That's the current plan right now. So today we're talking about bid rent theory, von Thunen's model, and then we'll talk about what von Thunen's model is like today. So let's talk about our learning targets really quickly. I want you to be able to define von Thunen's model and the bid rent theory. Explain the relationship between the cost of land and type of agriculture, and describe how von Thunen's model would look different if it was applied in different areas. So language today we're talking, discuss orally why different types of agriculture are located different distances from cities, and explain in writing how von Thunen's model can be applied in different contexts. Okay, we've talked about this briefly, you've read about this before. Intensive versus extensive agriculture. Intense means what? Means there's a lot of labor, the cost is high, but it's very productive. So intensive agriculture usually takes place near cities, and intensive agriculture usually takes place on a small area of land. Extensive agriculture requires less money, it requires less labor. Usually it takes place on large areas of land far away from cities, okay? So intensive versus extensive. So what I'm going to do today is we're going to review the images of different types of agriculture that we looked at before break. With your group, I want you to discuss two questions. Do you think this type of agriculture is intensive or extensive? And how far away from a city would this type of agriculture be located? Your choices are very close, close, medium, far, or very far. All right, so two questions. Intensive or extensive? How far is it away from the city? Everybody got it? I want you to discuss that with your group as I show you the image. All right, so here we go. Intensive or extensive? How far is it from the city? Go, talk with your group. Okay. Extensive or intensive? All right, not sure. How close to the city? Far. Why? Okay. It looks like a farm, it looks like the countryside. Would this type of plant or product need to be close to a city for any reason?
No.
Okay, maybe transportation, right? Okay, all right. Let's try our next one. Extensive or intensive, how close to a city? Extensive or intensive, how close to the city?
Intensive or medium.
What type of agriculture?
Actually, it's intensive for
Plantation. Okay. How close to the city? Far wide. Okay. All right. Maybe because it needs a large amount of land. Okay. What are those? Pineapples. Any reason they would need to be close to the city?
It's like high demand in the city.
Okay. All right. So, who remembers what type of agriculture this is? Plantation. All right. Extensive or intensive?
Intensive.
Okay. We get to see there's a lot of pineapples, right? So high yield per acre, so probably intensive. Close to the city, far away from the city?
medium.
Medium, Jeff. Why?
Because like there is no reason to put it that far, but but you still have to like transport them into the city to trade for.
Okay, so you have to produce them, and you don't have to put them very far away. Okay. Who remembers what? Here, we'll identify the type of agriculture first, then you can discuss. Slash and burn, or what? What's the other name?
Go.
Or shifting cultivation. Okay. All right. Discuss.
就是他上完之后，他再回来。
All right. What do we think? Okay. Close or far? Why?
You don't want to burn the city, right?
Because you don't want to burn the city down? Okay, that's good. Why else? Think economically. Why might it be closer?
Air pollution, water pollution.
Economically. Think economically.
Because of lands, if you are using a lot of lands, you can't build buildings which could be.
Okay, you're using a lot? Sure. Okay. All right. Extensive or intensive? Extensive or intensive? Okay, this one is extensive. Close or far away? Okay, probably far. Why? Why? Because of fire? Okay. Think about the farming, think about what they're growing, right? Close or far away? Far away. Why? What are they doing with the food they grow?
They burn.
They're not burning the food. Are they selling it or eating it? Eating it. So, what does that tell you? How close does it need to be to a city? If they're not selling it, don't have to be close to a city, right? Okay. Next. Who remembers what this is? Grains. Yeah, grain. All right. Extensive or extensive? How far away from the city? Extensive or why extensive? Huge. So usually, if it's a huge amount of machinery, is that extensive or intensive? So intensive is a large amount of production in a small area. What do we see here? So this one's kind of hard. So it's a lot of land, but it looks also pretty productive, right? Okay, so it's kind of how close to the city? Because you need larger what? You need a lot of land. Okay, so extensive or intensive? Okay, this one's kind of difficult to define, right? So how much land is there? A lot of land, which is usually extensive. But what are they using? A lot of machinery, so it's very expensive, which is usually intensive, right? So it's more expensive than like slash and burn is, but you still need a lot of land, okay? How far away from the city?
Very far.
Why?
Knowledge is required.
Because you need a lot of land, so maybe it's very far away from the city. Okay, who remembers what this one is? Actually, I don't know if you saw this one, but you should know this one.
Livestock.
Mixed crop livestock, right? You're growing plants and animals together. All right? All right, discuss.
装一个。
So some types of intensive, sorry, some extensive agriculture will be closer to others. All right, we'll talk about that. But usually the more intense, the more close it is to the city. Okay? All right, extensive or intensive? So this happens in both developed and developing countries. In developed countries, it's a bit more intensive because you usually are selling the products for profit. Where if it's happening in a developed country, it is subsistence. You're not selling it, okay? So how close is it to a city? Why?
Well, for undeveloped countries, you don't need to sell them. So.
Okay, you don't need to sell it, but also, like, what do we see in this picture? We see forest. Well, this is the crops in the back, and this is a cow, right? How much space do animals usually need? Usually animals need more space, right? So it's probably a little further away than other areas. Okay. Who remembers what this is? Market gardening, right? So growing fresh fruits and produce. All right. So extensive or intensive, distance from the city. Discuss. Go. Okay, what do we think? Why not? Okay, a lot of technology. How close to the city? Extensive or intensive? Intensive, why? Okay, so small area, a lot of cost, right? How close to the city? Why?
For sales.
So it's people from the city. Yes? I think. Tristan, what were you saying?
For sales. Like for selling.
Okay, yeah, so it is for selling, so it's close to a city. Also, it's like fresh fruits and vegetables. So why would that need to be close to a city?
Transporting time.
What was that, Paco?
We can shorten the transporting time.
Why is that important?
Because we need fresh food.
Fresh! Yes, fresh! Okay, that's our ingredient. Okay, here we go. Who remembers this one? Well, it does have livestock, but which type of livestock?
Nomadic.
Pastoral nomadism. All right? Extensive or intensive, how close to a city? Extensive or intensive, how close to a city? This one should be pretty easy. What is it? How far? All right. This one is extensive, right? It requires a lot of land, or nomads. And how close to a city? Very far away. All right. Now, this one is the opposite. Well, not the opposite, but livestock ranching. Same thing. All right. Same thing. How far? Extensive or intensive? Go, go, go. Which one is closer to the city? This one or why would this one be closer?
The extensive.
Yeah, they don't need to like sell. So this one's closer, but it's also extensive. Okay, 3, 2, 1. Okay, this one is also extensive, although it is more intensive than nomadic, pastoral nomadism is. Which one's closer to cities? This or pastoral nomads?
This.
Okay, why?
More intensive.
More intensive? What are they doing with it? They're selling it, right? So it needs to be closer to a city. Okay? Last one. This one's kind of tricky. Who remembers what this is? This is actually not a slaughterhouse. We'll talk about that. Dairy farming. Okay. Last one. Extensive or intensive? How close? All right, go.
Intensive.
Intensive for sure. Why close?
真的是压榨榨男的，对压榨。
Well, now we do, right? Okay, that's good. All right. So I want to bring back kind of what Jason was saying here. So everybody, intensive or extensive? Intensive, right? A lot of animals in a small area, a lot of machines, right? So location, Jason. Tell me what you were just saying.
No need for very close to the city.
Because?
Because we can process in the milk so that it can store longer than.
Okay, so now we can store milk longer, right? But in the past, how close did this need to be to a city?
Very close.
Very close, right? Why?
Fresh.
Thank you. Fresh Paco. All right. Good, good, good. All right. All of this is related to what is called the bid-rent curve. All right. This is a theory that is related to economics, and it shows up in a lot of different classes. And it's very straightforward. The closer you are to the center of a city, the more expensive land is. Makes sense, right? What does that mean? How does that affect the way that humans use land? That means the closer to a center of a city you are, the more productive the land needs to be. In other words, whatever you place close to the center of a city needs to make money. And the closer to the center of the city it is, the more money it needs to make. So take a look at this image of Chicago. How can you see the bid-rent curve in this image? Discuss this with your table right now. How can you see the bid-rent curve in this image? The closer something is to the center of the city, the more money it needs to make. Right?
它那个 bid rent 是什么？它那个 bid rent 是什么意思啊？
Bid rent curve 就是那个 curve，刚才上一小节的 curve。
在
What you see in this image is closer to the center.
这距离越
Higher value is
Okay, so in the center of the city, the buildings are
Exponential.
people living in those buildings? Probably.
如果你看第一个的话，你没有
What do you see in logistics in the background?
没有城市有这种活动吗？
What we just talked about. The closer to the center of the city it is, the more money it costs there. So things need to be more expensive. Okay, so Oliver, what do we see in this image that would be an example of the bid-rent curve?
House building in the middle.
Okay, so tallest buildings are in the middle. Are people living in these buildings?
No.
What type of buildings are they?
Commercial.
Commercial, right? Okay. And as you go further and further out, what happens to the buildings?
Shorter and shorter.
Because why?
They don't need that much land.
They don't need to produce as much money, so the land is cheaper. The same principle that affects the way we build cities affects where our agriculture is in the world. Today we're going to go over von Thunen's model. Now, von Thunen's model, the AP loves. They're going to ask you questions about it. It shows up every year on the test. But it's a little outdated. However, the same principles that were used to develop the original model can still be applied to our world today. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the original model together, and then you are going to use those principles to apply that model to our world today. All right? So, von Thunen's model was based on 18th century economist Johann Heinrich von Thunen. Very great name. And he used it as a way to describe where agriculture was located in relationship to German cities. And he said that agriculture developed like this. There was a single market at the center. The first ring around that was dairy and produce. After that was lumber. The third ring was grain. And the final ring around the city was livestock. So everybody, you need to grab out von Thunen theory's notes sheet of paper. So you need to grab out this sheet of paper right here. Okay? Everybody grab that out now. All right. Now, before we go through this, I want you to think about it for a moment. All right? I want you to fill out the first two boxes of the chart here together. And what we're going to do, what is there? What is in the first ring? And tell me why you think Von Thunen put it there. So, for example, what is the first ring here in the model? Well, that's the center. The first ring around the bar is dairy farming and market gardening. So right here where it says first ring, you would put dairy farming and market gardening. Does that make sense? Can we see that? So the urban center is the middle, and then the first ring right here on your model is dairy farming and market gardening. So fill that in right here. And then I want you to predict in the second box, why would dairy farming and market gardening be at the very middle? And I want you to think about Paco.
What? Fresh. Okay.
Right? Because these things need to be fresh. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Fill in the rest of the rings and make a guess why you think that's there. Do not fill in the last box. All right, so do the rest of the rings and make a guess about why it needs to be there. Instead of calling you the OP Paco, now we can call you Fresh Paco.
Okay, then add two.
I mean, I still like the OP, but...
We can both exist.
So forests, right? Why would forests be there? Remember, this is 150 years ago. Why would forests be so close to cities? Okay, so guys, why do we have forests near cities today? Okay, now go back 150 years ago. Yeah, right?
Make fire.
Well, it could be fire. What else would they use wood for? What else?
For building houses.
Building?
Yes.
So we don't necessarily use as much wood the same way, but think about 150 years ago. Okay, so forest is the second ring, right? Now, today, why do we have forests near cities? Okay, 150 years ago, why would they have forests near cities? Ah, yeah, like for wood, right? Did they use more wood 150 years ago than they do today? Okay, right. Okay, so the second ring is forest. Why do we have trees in cities? Why did they have trees in cities? Okay. All right. Sounds like we're almost done. We're going to go through these quickly together. If you got it right, I'm going to tell you the reason now. If you got it right, just put a little check mark in why it's there in the last column. If you got it wrong, write down the actual reason. All right? So we're talking about von Thunen's model, and we're just going to go through why it's there. Now, there are two things that von Thunen based his model on. And if you take a look at the bottom of your sheet, according to von Thunen, what were the two most important factors in determining where something was located in relationship to the city center? The two most important factors are the cost of land and the cost of transportation. So write those down underneath your chart. The cost of land and the cost of transportation. Underneath the chart where it asks where the two most important factors are. Yeah? This may or may not be a question on your test. Hint, hint, write it down. That's fine. Okay, cost of land and cost of transportation. You don't need to take a bunch of notes, just cost of land, cost of transportation. So why are things where they are? Okay. Let's start with the middle. You don't need to write anything down about this, but let's talk about what cities were like 150 years ago. 150 years ago, cities had a market. Essentially, most cities were centered around a central market. In this central market, people would bring things, and that was the place where everybody bought and sold all of their stuff. Is that how cities are structured today? No. All right? You can buy things all over cities. You can get things delivered to you, right? So this is all based on the model of cities 150 years ago. With that in mind, everything was based around getting to the center of the city. Okay? So let's start with our very first ring. The closest ring were fresh fruits and vegetables, Paco, and dairy. Now, why are these things closest to the center? These things can all go bad. Fruits, vegetables, milk, if you don't use them quickly, you can't use them. They are what we call perishable. They're things that spoil easily. All right? So things that are perishable need to be close to the center. Why? Because you need to transport them constantly. Every time you get new stuff, you have to move it right away. You can't store it for a long period of time. All right? So the food goes bad, it's perishable, it needs to be close to the center of the city. All right? Perishable is a word that you may see on the test. So I would write it down, even if you got it right and you said that Paco is fresh, you should write down the word perishable about why it's there. Okay? Now, the next ring is lumber, or wood. Now remember, cities 150 years ago needed wood. They needed wood for buildings. All right? They didn't make big buildings out of iron like we do today, or steel. So because of that, there was forests kept near the center of, not near the center of towns, but close to the center of towns. And why was this the second ring? Well, guys, trees are very heavy to move, right? So the transportation cost of lumber was very high. Because of that, if you put them very far away from cities, it would just be too expensive. So trees were the second ring outside of fresh fruits and vegetables. Now, wood doesn't go bad over time. Like, over a long, long, long time it does, okay? But it doesn't really matter. So, because of the high transportation cost of lumber, it was our second ring. Our third ring was grains. Now remember, grains take a lot of land. And so it needed to be further away because it needs more land to be profitable. But why is it further away than lumber is? It's not heavy. Easy to move. Okay? So it needs a lot of land, and it's easy to move, so it can be pretty far away. Now, you might look at this and say, Mr. Elsen, why is grain closer than the animals? Aren't animals heavier to move? What do animals have that wheat does not have?
Terrible smell.
Well,
They have flags.
they have legs! Paco, you are the man today. All right? The very last row was livestock. It also required a lot of land, but you could walk the animals into town. The transportation cost was very low. Okay? So the livestock were the very last row because you need more land than grain does, and the transportation cost was low. All right, does this generally make sense? Cost of land, cost of transportation. Perishable factors in a little bit, but that's primarily in the first row. Okay? All right, now we can see this bid rent curve in von Thunen's model, right? Dairies a little bit, very close, forest, grain, and livestock. All right, the amount of land that was needed determined where it was. So, let's say this question shows up on your test, right? Von Thunen emphasized which of the following factors in his model of agricultural land use? Transportation costs. Good. B. Now, flip your sheet over. There's a couple problems with Van Thunen's model. He made some assumptions that aren't true of our entire world today. The first assumption that he made was all land is equal. All right? If everywhere in the world has a city in the middle and good farmland around it, it might look like Van Thunen's model. The world doesn't look like that. All right? He made the assumption that all land was flat. Do cities look like this if they're on a mountain? No, probably not. He made the assumption that there was a single market. We don't have that anymore. And he made the assumption that transportation costs are only based on distance. Is that true?
No.
Like, it is very important, but like as Jason was telling us before, we have new types of technology that help like keep things cold as we're transporting them, right? Which is not the only cost of the transportation anymore. So today, we have all of these other things that we're going to talk about. And we're going to try and do this together with the example of a river. Okay? So everybody, take a look at the river here. All right? At the center of our river, we have the city of Gregsburg on the mighty river Elsen. If we're on a river, where would you put all of the different types of agriculture? Okay? So if you take a look at your sheet, it asks you where would you put market gardening and dairy if we are on a river. What do you guys think? Would that still be the closest to the center of the city? Okay, so it'd be very close to the river. Could it be on both sides of the river? Is it still important for these things to be close to the city? Really? Why not?
I think we can use river as a transportation way which can change the ways of.
So it can make the transportation cost cheaper, right? Okay, so let's pretend that the river is flowing this way, right? Now, let's say it's still close. Would dairy farms be located down here? No, because the river's going that way, right? So it's still close. So pick up a colored pencil. And we might have dairy farms here. And maybe up here too. Because you still have to transport it, right? And you don't want it to be very far away and it still needs to be fresh. But it's still going to be pretty close, right? What about lumber? Upstream, right? Lumber definitely upstream. So we might add another row here that goes like this, and it grows a little bit upstream. And we put lumber in there. Use another color for lumber. Use another color for lumber. Maybe green. Because this is still pretty close, right? So like very close underneath the city, right? The city's here. So it's still, right, that's a good question. So would there still be a little lumber south of the city? Yeah, a little bit, because if you're still close down here, it's still going to be pretty cheap. But there's going to be more room for it up here because you can use the river for transportation, right? Okay, what about grain? Where are you going to grow the grain? Near the water, right? So, where is it going to go? Can it go downstream? Sure. Can it also grow upstream? Yes. So I would probably put the grain following the river. And then outside of the lumber like this, right? And then we would put that grain. Why near the river, Jeff? Because you need it for irrigation, right? The trees do not need as much irrigation as the grain does. And then animals? Do you need as much irrigation for animals? No, probably not, right? Oh, sorry, I forgot to draw it on the other side too. And then here, we have livestock. Right. Now, at the bottom, we talked through why each of these things would be where it is. I want you to try and fill in this chart down here, explaining why each thing is located where it is. If you don't exactly know why, let me know what you're talking about. All right? All right, so try and fill in the chart on your own at the bottom of the chart. Give me 2 minutes, because I want you to fill that on the bottom of the chart. Okay? So on the bottom, explain why each thing is where it is. So why is each thing?
逼无屁呀！我看。
那个结果干嘛？高情商。
So is it still important for these two things to be close to the city? Right, so these both still need to be close, however, they can be a little further upstream because they can use the river to transport. Lumber is trees. But why would that be located where it is here? So not why, like, yes, people can lumber, but why is it located where it is? Right, so right, because here, it extends a little bit above the city because you can use the river for transportation. However, it's still going to be closer to the city because it's like, it's still primarily about transportation, but like when you get to grains, it's also about irrigation, right? So like the grains here need to be down because these are very light. So even though it's downriver, you can transport them very easily, right? Okay.
What about the coastal land?
The cost of land by the river is still going to be more expensive, and grain is more productive than animals, right? So around the river by no cities, you're going to get like grain farming and livestock farming outside of that. Okay, now want you to take a look at this other sheet, and you're going to do this on your own. I'm not walking you through this one. There are two different changes to our world today. The first one is multiple markets, and the one on the back is transportation. So on this sheet, you're going to do the exact same thing that we just did with the river. You're going to take a look at the map underneath. You're going to read through the description of the changes, and you're going to draw in where you think the different types of agriculture would go on this map. And then on the bottom, you would explain why you would put it there. Now, market gardening and dairy are together in Von Thunen's model, but I don't want you to think that they need to be. So if you want to separate them out, I have separated them out. Because of things like Jason mentioned earlier, like coal transportation has sort of separated dairy out as its own type of agriculture in terms of transportation costs, right? It's a little different than fresh fruits and vegetables are. Okay? So with your group, read through the changes, draw where the agriculture is, explain why it's there. Got it? Are there any questions? Okay. So remember, it's also possible that you could have something like you have a market garden by each city, and then the other one you like a centralized location between the city that you can travel to. So that's important for transportation, but also remember, like for market gardening, like the food needs to be fresh as well. So this could be the case. Right, and so it's not a huge amount of space either. So right, it could be here, it could be centrally located like that, but just think about it. Something like that could work too, where you have one here in between these two cities and one here in between these two. That could work too. Yes, ma'am. So this is the city here, and then this is the railroad, this is the airport, this is the seaport. The city, yeah, the city is the star. Okay, where do you think you would put market gardens on this one?
Further away from this market.
Market garden.
Near the city.
Would there just be one? No, you can have as many as you want.
3.
Like, I think there's a couple ways you could do it, right? You could have a little ring by each city.
Yeah.
You could have like one here that goes to each city, or you might have like a strip that like connects cities. So like, it really depends what you guys want to do. Okay?
So we think like each other one can be further away.
Probably like livestock and grain are going to be further away, but like these three, you would have to decide what you're going to want. Also, remember like how important is lumber today? Not as important as it used to be, right?
So we can utilize with the forest and like
Well, okay, but for now, think about it in terms of just lumber, not like.
Okay.
Which is like you're right, but like we're just focusing on agriculture. Okay. So which one are we?
如果这样的话，那其实 market 可以
What do we think? Okay, so closer to transportation is important. Who's it most important? Things that are perishable.
如果你要播在3个这个村变成交流的话，可能就没有一个。
Is it very heavy? Is it as important for the trees to be in
现在的话，
No, but they might want to be by like the railroad. Now you're probably not going to want trees
就6月份的时候特别火，
right? But railroad, probably, right? You put trees on ships. Yeah, maybe not, right? Okay, so maybe you put like the
你有
lumber
钱，然后的话呢，
here.
建
Like what would you put
然
on
后建
ships?
工厂，然后建房子，然后建 airport，
Put
然
grain
后
on
呢
ships, yeah.
自己管理。
You probably are you put grain on airport?
你要有钱。
Because grain is Is there anything on the list that you like to Okay, so maybe liquid, right? Maybe fresh, right? Those, I would think probably the best one is fresh. Right? So maybe you have that in here. Is everything getting something in the city? Or might they be going to
I don't know。
Okay, so we would take
我怎么
something
知道？
that
我怎么知
we
道？
can also transport
这
something
是属于话。
Okay, so there you go.
有些土。
Take it out. What do we think?
就不是以前那两个每个地方都上个产。
Okay, so let's talk about market garden. Where do we think that?
确实，所以你其实可以就是在这3个地方连起来换一换，然后连通这3个地方。
我就觉得它的那个，可是我们坐在那，我们知道。
Keep it fresh. Does it require a large area or a small area? So small area
那可能你这边产的话，其
fresh.
实这
So
边没有。
like I'm looking at TVs and is
哦，看怎么
the
定义这3个地方距离。
market gardening? So do you think the market gardening would connect the cities, or do you think it would only be in
无所谓啊，其实都差不多。你看广
like
西的
would you have market gardening here or only in the city? So right, like that's one of those things you have to consider. Like I think it could make sense to have,
对，那些资源是连
but I think it would also make sense to like you guys just have to decide. I think it would
那要不以后我就可以4块钱，4块钱这没问题，4块钱，4块5都可以。小动物。
Where's the market
对啊，
gardening?
不要再设。
Okay, it could be areas.
It's like this.
Alright, are both of these ways logical? Between cities and near
他们
cities?
不用冒着承担被
Okay, what are the considerations for market gardening? It needs to be fresh.
monopoly。
How much land does it take?
违反一下校规。
It doesn't take a lot of land. Okay, so the land is very cheap, but it needs to be fresh. Okay? Well, the land doesn't need to be cheap, right? It can be in a place that's more expensive, right? So it can be closer to a city. So I think both of those make sense. I think we could have centrally located, or you could even have like a small one out of the city. So I think both of them right? What about dairy?
老客户就是。
Same place.
以前很认真做这个，后来就去了太多了，是不是？
What else does dairy have? Which one has a higher chance of dairy or market?
所以我们应该是先确诊是胖，先跟那阿姨混熟。
Why is it longer fun?
12多吧。
You don't need to transport cows. No, dairy is not beef. Dairy is livestock ranching like beef. Dairy is different than livestock ranching. Dairy is livestock ranching.
就是你不要说有一件，
Transporting
然后
milk,
就
right?
一直带收阿姨收1块钱，然后你
Dairy or market garden.
共赢，你知道吧？共赢
Well, they both have to be fresh. What's the difference? Which one's milk or fresh? Okay. So is the transportation cost going to be higher for milk or fresh fruit? Okay. So the cost is higher. So does that mean it's going to be closer to cities or slightly further away? Really? Because remember, the cost of the land is also high. So if the cost of transportation is high and the cost of the land is high, that's why it might be a little further away, because the land would be a little cheaper, and it would offset the cost of the transportation. If it's right next to the city, then the cost of the land is high and the cost of the transportation.
如果麦当劳在学校建的就是一个库书，它一
Well,
收
dairy
到我
dairy is too small because it's not, the cows don't run around. Right? They just graze in the field and then.
但是如果
Livestock ranching is
他
much
说他
more
一年
expensive.
能拖食堂价500块钱，然后呢，
Yeah, it's
店铺一年
tough
700块
life
钱
for a，cow.
那很
Well, it's kind of a trade-off because if you're a dairy cow, you get to live for a long time, but in a very small space.
林克。
If you're a beef cow, you don't live as long, but you get to run around. Okay, so like that's just kind
对，
of
哎，
stuff, yeah.
是去世了，去世了，
Lumber, how important is
今
lumber?
天好像上新闻了，
Is it very important
对学校
today?
好像去世了，
It's not as important today. So which one is going to be
跟他
closer,
女儿的亲
lumber
戚
or
在
like
学校
grain?
前后 metal，
Could be, right?
那是没有不是。
So, all right.
不是，是他是我长嘛，
回去拐卖有钱，
我想我
招句子来要
去哪里有？
啊，
Oh yes, there is a max. Also, though, make sure on the bottom you do your
最多
justification.
女生有去，
Why did you put it green?
至少有8个。
阿狗，为什么你们一直都说你很好？
怎么了
你？吃饭也没那么多。
你在想什么？
我没想过，我只是好奇
滥用公职。
So, in the past, could you get fruit all year long?
我是被安排的。
我也是被安排，
问题是你是老大，
So why can't we get fruit all year long?
我会安排的是。
飞机老在。
Okay, but if you grow, if you see.
我被他们安排。
反正他们那
So where do you get oranges from when it's not orange season?
我要去哪个学校？
Other parts of the world. So transportation to other parts of the world.
这是等于
all year. So we
UNC
take a look. There's a single, London market has a single market. Modern cities have multiple places where you can buy goods, but also markets that
没事，你在大学去怎么做？
然
You
后带他
don't
们
just
去
sell
拿
your
到。
goods to places but produce comes from all over the world. Okay? So you not only sell things to people who are close to you, but you sell them to many different places. Okay? So let's start with market
可以
garden.
有啊，来在那。
Where would you put market
需要
garden?
把地买过。
你这有叫 San Diego Community College 吧 ？San Diego Community College，
或者什么？
圣地亚哥社区大学，那个是CC 里面最好的大学，你可以带他们去那个学校，然后让你们离他近一点。
Why would you do that?
追求就是
Okay, I want to hear why you put it. Okay, why would you put them close to the city?
不用是图书馆的事了吧？不用上大学，你们今天去外面看到毕业了，今天教你们是，其实也不用读书啊，你就规划一下，一个是图书馆，一个是饭店，一个教学楼，一个宿舍，
Okay, this is good.
约一下。
But the reason why people pay more for apprenticeships than they do for like grant, right? So yes, it is more expensive, but you also make more money in market than you do like raising So we still think it's going to be close to the city. Now, is it close like a little ring around the city or like in between cities? I think both make sense, right? Because like if it's in between cities, your transportation cost is higher,
我说我们后面就办公室。
right? Does that make sense? Because it has to go a further distance. If you're in the city though, the cost of buying the land is so it's a trade-off. So you guys have to decide.
明天有没有地址新家？
Just tell me where it's It's not correct or incorrect. There's more than one correct way to do it. I want to see your reason. Right now, the reason why you do it.
就是在写小标题。
What do we do on the other side? Whoa.
Aesthetic.
Why did you put the grain over here? Seaport? Why? So it's closer to irrigation? Which one of these things most would benefit from the trains?
The train.
The train.
The train.
Lumber? What else would benefit from trains? Probably livestock, right? Because they're heavy to move, right? So the things that are heaviest would probably be located closest to the train, right? What about dairy? Really? Are you flying milk many places?
But airlines are more fast.
Okay, so faster is good, right? But what's the problem with flying milk? What? The cost, right? It's very heavy and it's perishable, right? So, can you fly fruits and vegetables? Which one is easier to fly? Fruits and vegetables or milk? Fruits and vegetables, probably. All right, because it's less heavy than milk is, and also like people pay for fruits and vegetables, right? People pay more money for that than they do for like bread or grains, right? Okay, so like the grains, why buy the seaport? Okay, it could be irrigation. Now, if you're transporting grain, what are you going to use to transport it?
Ship.
Probably, why would you use a ship?
It's lower cost.
Lower cost,
You can
why
store
else?
it in for a while.
How much grain do you need to make money?
A lot.
You need a lot of it, right? So not only is it, you need to make a lot of it in order to make money, right? So you need something that can move a lot of stuff. So like airports, they're quick, but they don't move a lot of stuff. So like railroads or seaports are really good. Okay? Cool. All right, do the other side. Why? You tell me why.
Can we create
You've made another city?
yeah. No, this is like central.
Okay. So what did you put where?
We're in the middle because I'm an environmentalist and we have refuge also weekend. So it's also good for lumber transportation, transport to the city, to the market. And I put grain on the outside because, and also close to the city because it needs a large space. And also outside because they also need.
Let me ask you something today. Do we still just walk cows into the city today?
No.
What do we do?
Flex on the trucks.
We put them on trucks or railroads, right? So today, does ranching happen just out in the middle of nowhere, or does it have to be close to some sort of transportation?
Close to transportation.
So would that change your model?
Yeah. I'll add some type of
Right, but you're not just going to kill them in the middle of the field, right? Actually, what happens today is meat processing plants are located near highways and railroads, right? So, like, you don't take the animals to the middle of the city. You take them to the highway at the edge of the city. And that's where they kill the animals and process the animals. Okay? So, like, you would probably actually have, like, at these two corners would probably be where, like, the major majority. Okay, so okay, make sure you fill in the reason why on the bottom.
No.
哦，就感觉自己运气这个。是，非洲兄弟坐飞机过来打你，一会就干了，飞身上不了。
Now let me ask you this. Livestock.
到了，
就是all livestock. So, how is livestock? What is livestock mean? We don't walk animals in the county. Do we drive the animals? What do we think? Where are those animals? How did animals get there? Transporting the animals in and killing them in the city, killing them where they are, and then transporting them immediately. Okay, but that's very heavy, right? So what you have, so like, let's take a look at something like this, right? Where would be the best place to put the animals? Probably near the railroads, right? And like, probably further out is okay, because you're not close to the city where it's really expensive. Well, it could be like in the middle of the city, or it could be like down here, right? Because you still need the railroad, but not super close to the city, right? Or you could do it on the right? So it's, transportation is more important in this case than Okay, got it? Need an explanation for all that is. If you'd like to say after class. Why is it far? It needs a lot of land. The land cost is high. So it's going to be further away from the city, but it needs to be close to transportation to move meat. So close to transportation, but far away from the city. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's start with like animals, right? In the past, they used to walk out of So what do we do with animals today? Okay, first, before you walk them into town, make them to meet, and then you send them into town. Okay? So animals don't need a lot of space, but they also need what? Well, what do you do with the meat? It needs to be close to like the factory where they make the meat and some sort of transportation that's needed. Right? In the past, we didn't need that transportation. Today, the cost of moving and all right. Everybody, with that, 3, 2, 1. Okay. So, very quickly, I have a short exit ticket for you. You're going to be working with a partner now at your group of desks, not your whole group. I want each partner to answer this question in Chinese. Describe 2 changes to our world that have impacted where agricultural land use patterns are located. All right, both partners need to speak. I want one partner to share one reason in Chinese, and the other partner to share another reason in Chinese. Okay? We've read about several changes to our world today. And I've talked to our groups about several changes to our world today. Okay? So we're going to take 2 minutes right now to discuss with the partner in Chinese. Everybody ready? Group of 3, obviously, you're going to have to talk as a group of 3. Got it? Ready? Go. Discuss.
Transportation. Numbers of markets.
Jim, discuss. How does that change where things are? Babysitting, tell me why it would change where something. Yeah, it's not. Okay. All right. Discuss 2? Write your answer in English. All right. You got 2? Yeah. Write your answer in English. Okay. Did we discuss 2? Write your answer in English. Okay, then I can All right, now write your answer. Yes, both of you write. Okay, did we discuss? Write your answer now in English.
山也会分开，猫跟没麻烦。
Okay.
翻译一下。
Food storage. Food storage.
Well, can we still? I mean, fresh fruits and vegetables are still.
I mean, don't require it because for ours, like 1 2 years, it's not you farms or produce close to the same so this but today we have the processing technologies.
Okay, so it increases the life.
Yes.
Okay. When you are finished, you can give me your exit ticket on the way out the door. I do not need the sheets of paper. I do need your exit ticket. Okay? So on your way out, bring up your colored pencils and your exit ticket. Everybody got it? When you're finished, you're done.
That was described.